In the sleepy village of St. Mary Mead, a silver chalice vanishes from the vicarage, sparking a mystery that only Miss Jane Marple, a sharp-eyed spinster, can unravel. When the church bell tolls at 3 a.m. and a window shatters, clues pile up. A red scarf, a secret letter, a limping shadow, and a legend of hidden treasure. As Dr. Finch's lies, Lila Hawthorne's schemes, and Farmer Gibbs's greed tangle, Miss Marple sets a clever trap, catching the thieves in a moonlit showdown. With her knitting needles clicking and her mind sharper than ever, she restores the chalice and peace to the village, proving secrets can't hide from her quiet gaze. Chapter 1. The Vicarage Bell. The village of St. Mary Mead lay quiet under a blanket of early morning mist, its cottages and narrow lanes wrapped in the soft hush of dawn. Miss Jane Marple, a slight figure with sharp eyes and a knack for noticing things others missed, sat by her cottage window, a cup of tea steaming in her hands. Her home, a tidy place with rose trellises and a neat garden, faced the vicarage, the heart of the village's gentle rhythm. But this morning, something was off. The vicarage bell, which usually rang at predictable times for services or meetings, tolled at an odd hour, 3 a.m. Its deep, lonely clang cut through the silence, stirring Miss Marple from her light sleep. She didn't rush or fuss. Instead, she sipped her tea, her mind already turning over possibilities like a gardener turning soil. By sunrise, a small crowd had gathered outside the vicarage, a handsome red brick building with ivy climbing its walls. Miss Marple, pulling a woolen shawl over her shoulders, stepped out to join them. Her steps were slow but deliberate, her eyes scanning faces, curious, worried, or just nosy. The vicarage housed Reverend Leonard Clement, a young man with a kind heart but a nervous streak, and his lively wife, Griselda, who brought a spark of mischief to the village. Something big had happened, Miss Marple could tell, because Constable Hurst was there, pacing with a notebook in hand, his face red and flustered. "What's the trouble, Constable?" Miss Marple asked, her voice gentle but firm, like a teacher, calming a classroom. Hurst wiped his brow. "It's the vicarage, Miss Marple. Someone broke in last night, smashed the study window, and took the silver chalice. That old one from the church, worth a fortune, they say." Miss Marple's eyebrows lifted slightly. The chalice, a gleaming piece of 17th century silver, was no ordinary cup. It had been used in St. Mary Mead's church for centuries, passed down through generations of vicars. Its carvings, delicate and worn, told stories of saints and angels, and its value wasn't just in the metal, but in the history it carried. Why would someone steal it and leave the vicarage's other treasures? A gold candlestick, a pearl brooch Griselda loved, untouched. It was a puzzle, and Miss Marple loved puzzles. Reverend Clement stood by the vicarage door, his thin frame trembling slightly. His glasses slipped down his nose as he spoke to the crowd. "I heard nothing, I swear. We were all asleep. The window was locked, the doors bolted. It's a mystery." Griselda, her dark curls bouncing as she moved, tugged at her husband's sleeve. "Len, tell them about the shadow," she whispered, loud enough for Miss Marple to hear. Griselda's eyes, bright with excitement, met Miss Marple's. "I saw someone in the garden last night, Miss Marple. Just a shape, moving near the roses. I thought it was a fox at first, but it was too tall." Miss Marple nodded, tucking the detail away. A shadow in the garden, a broken window, a missing chalice. The pieces didn't fit yet, but they would. They always did. She glanced at the study window, its glass shattered in a jagged circle, as if someone had punched through with care. No mess, no scattered shards on the lawn. Whoever did this was neat, purposeful, not a clumsy thief, then, the crowd murmured, tossing out guesses. Old Mrs. Price, who ran the post office, blamed gypsies passing through. Tom Bates, Miss Marple's gardener, grumbled about city folk sneaking into the village. But Miss Marple didn't care for wild guesses. She watched faces, listened to tones, and noted who stood too close to the vicarage gate, who lingered too long. That's when she spotted Dr. Elias Finch, the vicarage's guest. Dr. Finch was a wiry man, middle-aged, with a sharp nose and a habit of twitching his left eye when he spoke. He'd arrived in St. Mary Mead a week ago, claiming to be a historian studying old church relics. The Clements, ever kind, had offered him a room at the vicarage. Finch stood apart from the crowd, his hands stuffed in his coat pockets, his eyes darting from the broken window to the faces around him. Miss Marple noticed a faint stain on his cuff. Ink, perhaps, or something else. Turpentine, maybe. It was an odd smell for a scholar, more suited to a painter or a cleaner. "Dr. Finch," Miss Marple called softly, stepping closer. "What? A shock this must be for you, staying so near the crime." Finch's eye twitched. "Oh, yes, Miss Marple. Terrible business. I was asleep, didn't hear a thing. My room's at the back, you see, far from the study." Miss Marple smiled, her expression warm, but her mind sharp. His room was at the back, true, but it overlooked the garden where Griselda saw the shadow. And that turpentine smell, it nagged at her. She remembered a case years ago when a thief used turpentine to clean stolen silver before selling it. Was Finch involved, or was he just a nervous guest caught in the wrong place? She'd find out, but not by rushing. Rushing ruined things, like overwatering a rose. The village was small, its people predictable, but Miss Marple knew better than to trust appearances. St. Mary Mead had its secrets, tucked behind lace curtains and polite smiles. She wandered back to the vicarage gate, pretending to admire Griselda's roses, but her eyes traced the ground. The grass was trampled near the broken window, but not in a wild way. The marks were careful, almost staged, as if someone wanted to leave a sign without leaving too much. A single rose petal, crushed and out of place, caught her attention. She bent down, her knees creaking, and picked it up. It was fresh, not wilted, meaning it fell recently, perhaps last night. "Griselda, dear," Miss Marple called, holding up the petal. "Your roses are lovely, but this one's been stepped on, near the window too." Griselda hurried over, her skirt swishing. "That's odd. I checked the garden yesterday, and everything was perfect. Len's so fussy about the roses, you know." Miss Marple nodded, her mind elsewhere. The petal suggested someone had been in the garden, close to the window, but the careful footprints hinted at planning. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment theft. Someone knew the vicarage, knew the chalice, knew its place in the study. Her thoughts drifted to Dr. Finch again. He'd spent days sketching the chalice, asking Reverend Clement about its history. Was he studying it for his research or for something else? The crowd began to thin as the morning sun climbed higher, Constable Hurst promised to get to the bottom of it, but Miss Marple knew his methods. Loud questions and quick arrests often missed the truth. She preferred her own way, watching, listening, letting people reveal themselves. She thought of her nephew Raymond, who called her a nosy old bat with a laugh. He wasn't wrong, but nosiness had solved more crimes than Hurst's notebook ever would. Back at her cottage, Miss Marple settled into her armchair, her knitting needles clicking softly. Her maid, Emily, bustled in with a fresh pot of tea. "Heard about the vicarage, miss? Everyone's talking. They say it's a gang from London, come to rob us blind." Miss Marple smiled. "People love a good story, Emily. But gangs don't sneak into quiet villages for one cup. This is something else." Emily nodded, used to her mistress's cryptic ways. Miss Marple's mind wandered to the chalice. It wasn't just valuable. It was a symbol, a piece of St. Mary Mead's soul. Stealing it was like stealing the village's heart. But why? Money was the obvious answer, but obvious answers were often wrong. She recalled a story from her childhood, when a thief stole a church bell, not for its metal, but to hide a message carved inside. Could the chalice hold a secret too? She decided to visit the vicarage later, to talk to Griselda. The young woman's sharp eyes and loose tongue might reveal more about the shadow she saw. Miss Marple also wanted to watch Dr. Finch. His twitchy, manner and turpentine scent were small clues, but small clues grew into big answers. She thought of her garden, how a single weed could choke a rose if left unchecked. Finch might be a weed, or he might be a distraction. Either way, she'd find out. The village clock struck noon, its chime softer than the vicarage bell's eerie toll. Miss Marple set her knitting aside and stood, her movements slow, but her mind racing. She'd start with the garden, then the vicarage, then Finch. The chalice was gone, but its trail was fresh, and Miss Marple, with her quiet steps and sharp eyes, was already on it. As she stepped outside, the village seemed to hum with secrets. The baker's boy whistled too loudly, the postman lingered too long at the gate, and Mrs. Price's curtains twitched as Miss Marple passed. St. Vreer, dream, was awake, and so was its mystery. The chalice was more than silver. It was a key, and Miss Marple meant to find the lock it opened. Chapter 2. The Curious Guest. The sun climbed higher over St. Mary Mead, casting long shadows across the village green. Miss Jane Marple, her mind as sharp as the knitting needles in her basket, stood in her garden, pruning roses with careful snips. Her cottage, with its whitewashed walls and tidy flower beds, was a perfect perch for watching the world, and the vicarage, where the mystery of the stolen silver chalice had set tongues wagging. The bell's strange toll at 3 a.m. still echoed, in her thoughts, like a note played off-key. She'd seen the broken study window, heard Griselda's tale of a shadow in the garden, and noticed Dr. Elias Finch's twitchy manner. Now she needed to dig deeper, like a gardener seeking the root of a weed. The village was alive with chatter. At the bakery, Mrs. Baker swore the theft was the work of outsiders with no respect for sacred things. At the post office, Mrs. Price whispered about a curse tied to the chalice, her eyes wide with drama. Miss Marple didn't bother with such tales. Gossip was like chaff, mostly useless, but sometimes a grain of truth hid within. She decided to focus on Dr. Finch, the vicarage's guest, whose nervous tick and turpentine-scented coat had caught her attention. A historian, he claimed, but historians didn't smell of cleaning solvents, and they didn't fidget like a mouse in a trap. Miss Marple smoothed her shawl and walked toward the Blue Boar Inn, where villagers gathered to swap stories over tea and ale. The inn, with its low beams and smoky hearth, was the heart of St. Mary Mead's rumours. She settled at a corner table, her knitting in her lap, and ordered a pot of Earl Grey. From here she could hear the buzz of voices, farmers, shopkeepers, and maids, all with their own take on the chalice's theft. She listened, her needles clicking softly, catching snippets of talk like a net catching fish. "Finch was out late again," muttered Tom Bates, her gardener, to the innkeeper. "Saw him near the churchyard, scribbling in that notebook of his. Odd fellow, always poking about." Miss Marple's ears pricked up. Tom, a gruff man with dirt under his nails and a memory like a steel trap, wasn't one for idle talk. If he'd seen Finch wandering at night, it was worth noting. She recalled a case from years back, when a so-called scholar turned out to be a thief casing a manor house. Finch's interest in the chalice, his endless sketches and questions, felt too keen for pure study. Was he after the chalice's silver, or something more? She sipped her tea, her eyes drifting to the inn's door as Dr. Finch himself walked in. He wore a tweed coat, slightly frayed at the cuffs, and his left eye twitched as he scanned the room. He didn't notice Miss Marple, tucked in her corner like a shadow. He ordered a pint and sat near the window, his fingers tapping a nervous rhythm on the table. Miss Marple watched, noting the ink stains on his hands, darker today, and that faint whiff of turpentine clinging to him. It wasn't strong, but it was there, sharp and chemical, like a clue left in plain sight. "Dr. Finch," she called, her voice warm and inviting, like a grandmother offering biscuits. "Won't you join me? I'd love to hear about your work." Finch started, his eye twitching faster. He hesitated, then carried his pint to her table, sitting with a stiff smile. "Miss Marple, isn't it? Kind of you. I'm just studying old relics, you know, church history and such." "Oh, how fascinating," she said, her needles never pausing. "The chalice must have been a treasure for your research. Such a pity it's gone." Finch's smile faltered. "Yes, a pity. It was unique. Fine craftsmanship, 17th century work. I'd only just started documenting it." Miss Marple tilted her head, her eyes soft but piercing. "You sketched it, didn't you? Griselda mentioned your drawings, so detailed. Did you notice anything special about it? A mark, perhaps, or an inscription?" Finch's fingers tightened around his glass. "Nothing unusual, just silver, well made. I didn't get far before, well, you know." His voice was quick, too quick, like a man dodging a question. She nodded, letting the silence stretch. People often filled silences with truths they meant to hide. But Finch stayed quiet, his eyes darting to the window. Miss Marple changed tack. "You must find our village dull after city life. Do you walk much at night? The air's so fresh here." His eye twitched again. "Not often. I read mostly in my room. History books, heavy stuff." He laughed, but it sounded forced, like a creaky hinge. Miss Marple smiled, tucking the lie away. Tom had seen him out late, and Griselda's shadow moved at night. Finch was hiding something, but pushing him now would only make him clam up. Thanked him for the chat and let him go, watching as he hurried out, his coat flapping like a startled bird. Back at her cottage, Miss Marple sat by her fire, her knitting a steady rhythm. Finch was a piece of the puzzle, but not the whole picture. She thought of the broken window, the careful footprints, the crushed rose petal. The theft was planned, not a grab and run. Someone knew the vicarage's layout, knew where the chalice sat in the study. Finch, as a guest, had that knowledge, but so did others, servants, visitors, even the Clements themselves, though she doubted their guilt. Reverend Clement was too earnest, Griselda too open. Still, she'd learned never to assume. Her thoughts turned to the village itself. St. Mary Mead was small, its people woven together like threads in a quilt. Everyone knew everyone's business, or thought they did. She decided to visit the vicarage again, to talk to Griselda and poke around the garden. The shadow Griselda saw was a loose thread, and Miss Marple was good at pulling threads. The vicarage stood quiet in the afternoon light, its ivy gleaming green against the brick. Griselda was in the parlour, arranging flowers in a vase, her curls bouncing as she hummed. "Miss Marple, come in, have some tea. Len's out visiting Mrs. Price. She's got a cold, or so she says." Miss Marple settled into a chair, her eyes scanning the room. The parlour was cosy, cluttered with books and cushions, a stark contrast to the study's neat shelves. "Griselda, dear, tell me more about that shadow you saw. Was it tall, short, man or woman?" Griselda paused, a daisy in her hand. "Hard to say. Tallish, I think, but not like Tom Bates tall. It moved fast, near the rose beds, then vanished. I only saw it because I was up late, reading a silly novel." She grinned, then frowned. "Do you think it was the thief?" "Perhaps," Miss Marple said, her voice mild. "Did you hear anything? A rustle, a step?" Griselda shook her head. "Just the wind, I thought. But it was creepy, knowing someone was out there." Miss Marple nodded, her mind sketching a picture. A tallish figure, quick and quiet, in the garden before the theft. Finch was tall, but so were half the men in the village. She needed more. "May I see the garden, dear? Your roses are so lovely." Griselda led her outside, chattering about her flowers. The garden was a patchwork of colour. Red roses, yellow daisies, purple lavender. Miss Marple knelt by the rosebed near the study window, her fingers brushing the soil. The trampled grass was still there, but she noticed something new. A tiny scrap of cloth, caught on a thorn. It was grey like Finch's coat, but coarser, like a workman's jacket. She tucked it into her pocket, her face calm, but her heart quickening. "Griselda, has anyone else been in the garden lately? A delivery boy, perhaps, or a visitor?" Griselda thought for a moment. "Just Tom cutting the grass. And Dr. Finch, of course. He likes to sit out here sketching. Oh, and Mrs. Hawthorne came by yesterday, dropping off a pie. She's new, runs the antiques shop, Miss Marple's." Ears perked up. Mrs. Lila Hawthorne was a newcomer, elegant and reserved, with a shop full of old trinkets. Antiques dealers knew silver, knew value. Could she be linked to the chalice? Miss Marple filed the name away, like a seed to plant later. Back in the vicarage, she glanced at the study door, locked now to keep out curious villagers. "Griselda, did Dr. Finch spend much time in the study?" "Oh, yes," Griselda said, rolling her eyes. "Always in there, drawing that chalice. Len said he asked odd questions, like where it came from, who owned it before. I thought it was just historian stuff, but it gave me the shivers." Miss Marple nodded, her mind spinning. Finch's questions weren't just curious, they were pointed. He was searching for something, maybe more than the chalice's history. She thanked Griselda and left, her steps slow, but her thoughts racing. The scrap of cloth, Finch's lies, the shadow in the garden. It was all connected, but the thread was still tangled. That evening Miss Marple sat by her window watching the vicarage. A light burned in Finch's room, flickering as he moved. She wondered what he was writing in that notebook Tom mentioned. Sketches of the chalice, yes, but what else? She recalled a case in a nearby village where a thief posed as a guest, learning a house's secrets before striking. Finch fit the pattern, but patterns could trick you. She needed to see him again, to watch his eyes, his hands, his lies. The village clock chimed 7, its sound soft and steady, unlike the vicarage bell's eerie toll. Miss Marple picked up her knitting, her needles clicking like a metronome. The chalice was gone, but its shadow lingered, pointing to Finch, to the garden, to secrets buried in St. Mary Mead's quiet lanes. She'd invite Finch for tea tomorrow, a friendly chat to loosen his tongue. And she'd keep an eye on Mrs. Hawthorne. The mystery was young, but Miss Marple was patient. Truth, like a rose, bloomed in its own time. Chapter 3. The Gardener's Tale. The morning sun spilled over St. Mary Mead, painting the village in shades of gold and green. Miss Jane Marple stood in her garden, her hands busy with a trowel, digging around her prized roses. Her cottage, with its neat shutters and climbing ivy, sat close to the vicarage, giving her a clear view of its red brick walls and tangled garden. The mystery of the stolen silver chalice gnawed at her like a thorn in a glove. The vicarage bell's strange toll at 3 a.m., the smashed study window, Griselda's shadowy figure, and Dr. Elias Finch's nervous twitch. All were pieces of a puzzle she was determined to solve. But puzzles needed patience, and Miss Marple had plenty of that. Her garden was more than a hobby. It was a vantage point. From here she could see who came and went, who lingered too long by the vicarage gate. Today she'd enlisted Tom Bates, her gardener, to help her dig deeper, not just in the soil, but in the village's secrets. Tom was a burly man with hands like spades and a memory sharper than her pruning shears. He wasn't one for gossip, but he saw things, and Miss Marple trusted his eyes. "Tom," she called, brushing dirt from her gloves, "you've been working near the vicarage. Seen anything odd lately? Strangers, perhaps?" Tom leaned on his rake, his weathered face creasing. "Aye, Miss Marple. 2 nights back, before the chalice went missing, I saw a woman by the vicarage hedge, wore a red scarf, carried a small case, looked like she didn't want to be seen skulking about." Miss Marple's heart quickened, but her face stayed calm, like a pond hiding ripples. A woman with a red scarf, near the vicarage, just before the theft. Griselda had mentioned a shadow in the garden. Could this be the same person? What time was this, Tom? And what did she look like? Round about 9, maybe 10, Tom said, scratching his chin. Dark hair, I think, but it was hard to tell with the scarf. She was quick, slipped into the lane by the church. Didn't see her face. Miss Marple nodded, tucking the detail away like a seed in her pocket. A red scarf was bold, noticeable, odd for someone trying to hide. She thought of her knitting, how a bright thread stood out against plain wool. Was this woman careless, or was the scarf meant to be seen? She thanked Tom and turned her attention to the vicarage garden, where the rosebeds held their own clues. The vicarage garden was a tangle of beauty and neglect, with Griselda's bright roses clashing against overgrown hedges. Miss Marple walked the path to the study window, her eyes scanning the ground. The trampled grass she'd noticed yesterday was still there, but now she saw something new. A faint scuff mark in the dirt, shaped like the edge of a boot. It wasn't deep, as if the person had stepped lightly, avoiding a trace. She knelt, her knees creaking, and studied the mark. It was narrow, more like a woman's boot than a man's. The red scarf woman, perhaps. She thought back to Tom's words. A small case could hold tools, a crowbar, a cloth to wrap the chalice. But why the vicarage? Why the chalice and nothing else? She recalled a theft in a neighbouring village, where a woman posed as a maid to steal a single painting, leaving jewels behind. The thief knew what she wanted. This felt similar, focused, planned. Miss Marple straightened, her mind buzzing. Dr. Finch, the vicarage's twitchy guest, was still her main suspect. His turpentine-scented coat and late-night walks, as Tom had seen, pointed to trouble. But the red scarf woman added a new thread. Was she working with Finch, or was she a rival? Miss Marple decided to visit the village square, where the daily bustle might reveal more. The square was alive with activity. The baker's boy wheeled a cart of fresh loaves. The blacksmith's hammer rang out, and children darted between stalls, laughing. Miss Marple settled on a bench, her knitting in her lap, her eyes sharp behind her gentle smile. She watched the crowd, looking for a red scarf or a nervous glance. The village was small, but newcomers stood out like daisies in a wheat field. She thought of Mrs. Lila Hawthorne, the antiques dealer Griselda mentioned. A red scarf would suit her, elegant, bold, just like her shop's polished trinkets. As if summoned by thought, Lila Hawthorne appeared, crossing the square with a basket on her arm. Her dark hair was pinned neatly, and a red scarf fluttered at her neck, bright as a poppy. Miss Marple's fingers paused on her needles. Lila moved with grace, but her eyes flicked to the sides as if checking for watchers. She stopped at the baker's stall, chatting with Mrs. Baker, but her smile was tight, like a knot tied too fast. Miss Marple rose, tucking her knitting away, and strolled toward the stall. "Mrs. Hawthorne, how nice to see you," she said, her voice warm as tea. "Your scarf is lovely, so striking." Lila's hand touched the scarf, her fingers lingering. "Thank you, Miss Marple. It's an old thing, but I like bright colours." Her voice was smooth, but her eyes were wary, like a cat watching a bird. "Bright colours do catch the eye," Miss Marple said, her tone light. "You must be busy with your shop. Any new treasures lately? Silver, perhaps?" Lila's smile didn't waver, but her fingers tightened on her basket. "Oh, just odds and ends. Nothing as grand as that chalice, I'm afraid. Such a shame it was stolen." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes soft but searching. Lila's quick mention of the chalice felt rehearsed, like a line from a play. She thanked her and moved on, but not before noting the small case Lila carried. A leather bag, just big enough for tools or a small treasure. Tom's story echoed in her mind. Was Lila the woman by the hedge, or was someone else wearing a red scarf to point suspicion her way? Back at her cottage, Miss Marple brewed a fresh pot of tea and sat by her window, her knitting a steady rhythm. The red scarf was a bold clue, but bold clues could be tricks. She thought of a case years ago where a thief left a bright handkerchief at a crime scene to frame another. Was the scarf a mistake or a decoy? She needed to know more about Lila. The antiques shop was a good place to start, but first she'd talk to Tom again. His eyes missed nothing, and he might have seen the woman's face clearer than he thought. Tom was in the garden, raking leaves, his face red from the sun. "Tom, that woman with the red scarf," Miss Marple said, leaning on her gate. "Did she walk with a limp, or carry herself in any special way?" Tom paused, his rake still. "No limp, miss. She was quick, like I said, but now you mention it, she held that case tight, like it was heavy. Not tools, maybe, but something solid." Miss Marple's mind raced. A heavy case could hold the chalice, wrapped to avoid clinking. Or it could be something else. A book, a box, even a weapon. She thanked Tom and turned her attention to the vicarage garden again, walking its paths with careful steps. Near the hedge, where Tom saw the woman, she found another clue. A tiny metal hook, like one from a latch or a bag. It was shiny, not rusted, meaning it was dropped recently. She slipped it into her pocket next to the grey cloth from the rosebed. The hook puzzled her. It didn't match Lila's leather case, which had no visible latches. Was it from another bag, or something, left behind by the thief? She thought of Finch's sketches, his turpentine scent, his late-night walks. Could he have a partner? Someone like the red scarf woman? Or was Lila working alone, using her shop as a front? Miss Marple knew antiques dealers often dealt in more than trinkets. Some traded secrets or stolen goods. She decided to visit the church, where the chalice had once stood during services. Reverend Clement was there, polishing pews, his face drawn with worry. "Miss Marple," he said, pushing up his glasses, "I can't stop thinking about the chalice. It's my fault, isn't it? I should have locked it away." "Nonsense, Leonard," she said, patting his arm. "Thieves don't wait for invitations." "Did Dr. Finch ever talk about the chalice's history? Anything unusual?" Clement frowned. He asked if it had any marks, like engravings or scratches. Said it might tie to some old legend. I thought he was just curious, but now— Miss Marple's heart skipped. A legend. She recalled a story from her youth about a church relic hiding a clue to buried treasure. Could the chalice hold such a secret? Finch's questions weren't random. They were a map. She thanked Clement and left, her mind spinning like a wheel. That evening she sat by her fire, her knitting needles clicking. The red scarf, the metal hook, the scuff mark, Finch's, lies. They were threads in a tapestry, but the pattern was still blurry. She'd visit Lila's shop tomorrow, to look for clues among the silver and glass. And she'd watch Finch closer, maybe invite him for tea again. His twitchy eyes held answers, if she could make him slip. The village was quiet now. its lights winking out one by one. But Miss Marple's mind was awake, turning over clues like stones in a stream. The chalice was more than silver. It was a key to something bigger. And in St. Mary Mead, where secrets hid behind every curtain, she was determined to find it. Chapter 4. The Red Scarf. The morning mist clung to St. Mary Mead like a soft shawl, wrapping the village in a hush broken only by the chirp of sparrows. Miss Jane Marple, her sharp eyes hidden behind a gentle smile, stood at her cottage gate, watching the world wake up. Her garden, with its neat rows of roses and lavender, was a quiet perch for observing the vicarage, where the mystery of the stolen silver chalice grew thornier by the day. The bell's eerie toll at 3 a.m., the smashed study window, Griselda's shadowy figure, Dr. Finch's twitchy lies, and now Tom's tale of a woman in a red scarf. These were threads in a tangle Miss Marple was determined to unravel. She wasn't one to rush, though. Truth, like a bud, opened slowly. The village buzzed with fresh gossip. At the grocer's, Mr. Jenkins swore the chalice was cursed, stolen by ghosts. At the tea shop, young Sally the maid whispered about strangers seen near the church. Miss Marple didn't bother with such tales. They were like weeds, choking the truth. Her mind was on Mrs. Lila Hawthorne, the antiques dealer with the red scarf, who'd appeared in the square yesterday, her eyes wary and her case heavy. Tom's story of the woman by the vicarage hedge matched Lila too well to ignore. Was she the shadow Griselda saw, or a decoy in someone else's game? Miss Marple smoothed her shawl and headed to the village fete, a yearly event where St. Mary Mead showed off its jams, pies, and secrets. The fete was set up on the green, with stalls draped in bunting and children chasing ribbons. She settled on a bench, her knitting in her lap, her eyes scanning the crowd like a hawk watching a field. The fete was a perfect place to spot clues. People let their guard down amid laughter and cake. She'd come to find Lila, to watch her, to see if that red scarf hid more than style. The air smelled of sugar and hay, and voices rose in a cheerful hum. Miss Marple's needles clicked steadily, a rhythm that kept her thoughts clear. She spotted Reverend Clement near a stall, juggling a plate of scones and a worried frown. Griselda was beside him, her curls bouncing as she laughed with a group of women. Dr. Finch was there too, lingering by a bookstall, his fingers flipping through pages, but his eyes darting to the crowd. Miss Marple noted his tense shoulders, his quick glances. He was hunting for something, or someone. Then she saw Lila Hawthorne, standing by a stall selling handmade quilts. Her red scarf was knotted loosely, its bright silk catching the sun. She was talking to Billy Trent, her young assistant, a lanky boy with a mop of blonde hair and a nervous grin. Lila's voice was low, but her hands moved sharply, as if scolding him. Billy nodded, then scurried off, clutching a small parcel. Miss Marple's heart ticked faster. A parcel, like the case Tom described. Was it a coincidence, or a piece of the puzzle? She rose, tucking her knitting away, and strolled toward Lila's stall, pretending to admire a patchwork quilt. "Mrs. Hawthorne, what lovely work," she said, her voice warm as honey. "You must have an eye for treasures, running that shop of yours." Lila turned, her smile polished but tight. "Thank you, Miss Marple. I do love beautiful things. Just odds." And ends mostly, but they tell stories. Her fingers brushed her scarf, a quick, nervous gesture. Stories are fascinating, Miss Marple said, her eyes soft but sharp. Like that chalice from the vicarage. Such a story it must have. Have you ever seen one like it in your trade? Lila's smile didn't waver, but her eyes flickered like a candle in a draught. Not quite like it, no. Silver's common in my shop, but that chalice was special. A shame it's gone. Her voice was smooth, but Miss Marple caught a hitch. A tiny crack in her calm. Oh yes, a shame, Miss Marple said, picking up a quilt square. You must be out and about, picking up new pieces. Were you near the vicarage lately? Griselda mentioned you dropped off a pie. Lila's hand stilled on her scarf. Just the once, yes. A neighbourly thing. I was home most nights, though, sorting stock. She laughed, but it sounded thin, like a bell with no ring. Miss Marple nodded, letting the silence grow. Silence made people talk, and Lila was no exception. It's a quiet village, Lila added quickly. Hardly anything happens until this theft, of course. Of course, Miss Marple said, her smile gentle. She thanked Lila and moved on, but her mind was spinning. Lila's quick denial about being near the vicarage felt rehearsed, like a line practised in a mirror. And Billy's parcel, small, heavy, wrapped in brown paper, nagged at her. She thought of a case years ago, where an antiques dealer hid stolen goods in plain sight, passing them off as shop stock. Was Lila doing the same? She wandered to the bookstall, where Finch was still browsing, his fingers stained with ink. He didn't see her approach, too busy flipping through an old volume on church relics. Miss Marple peeked over his shoulder, catching a glimpse of a page about silver chalices. Dr. Finch, finding something interesting? She asked, her voice mild. Finch jumped, nearly dropping the book. Oh, Miss Marple, just research, you know. Old churches, old treasures. His eye twitched, and that turpentine smell wafted from his coat, sharp and out of place. Treasures indeed, she said, tilting her head. You must miss sketching the chalice. Did you ever notice anything odd about it? A mark, perhaps? Finch's fingers tightened on the book. No, nothing. Odd, just fine silver. I should go. He hurried off, leaving the book open on the stall. Miss Marple glanced at the page. A drawing of a chalice, much like the vicarage's, with a note about hidden engravings. Her heart skipped. Finch wasn't just studying history. He was chasing something specific. She recalled Reverend Clement's mention of a legend, a clue tied to the chalice. Was Finch after that, or was he covering his tracks? She returned to her bench, her knitting a steady rhythm. The fate hummed around her, but her thoughts were on Lila and Finch. Lila's red scarf matched Tom's story, but her quick denials and Billy's parcel raised questions. Finch's book and turpentine scent pointed to more than scholarship. She needed to see Lila's shop, to look for the chalice or something like it. But first she'd talk to Billy Trent. Young boys often spilled secrets without meaning to. She found Billy near the pie stall, munching on a slice of apple tart. "Billy, you're helping Mrs. Hawthorne today?" she asked, offering a smile. Billy nodded, his mouth full. "Yup, carrying stuff mostly. She's fussy about her shop." "She must keep you busy," Miss Marple said, her tone light. Were you with her the night the chalice was stolen? It must have been a quiet evening." Billy swallowed, his eyes darting. Yeah, quiet. I was at the shop, I think, helping with boxes." He looked away, his cheeks red. Miss Marple nodded, noting his stumble. Boys like Billy didn't lie well. Lila had said she was home, but Billy's words hinted she was out. Was she the woman by the hedge, or was Billy covering for someone else? She thanked him and let him go, her mind turning over the new clue. Back at her cottage, Miss Marple brewed tea and sat by her fire, her knitting needles clicking like a clock. She pulled out the metal hook and grey cloth from her pocket, laying them on the table. The hook was small, shiny, like part of a clasp. The cloth was coarse, not from Finch's tweed coat, but maybe from a worker's jacket. She thought of the scuff mark in the garden, the narrow boot, a woman's boot, perhaps Lila's, but the cloth suggested someone else. A man, maybe, working with her. She recalled a case in a nearby town where a thief's assistant left a button at the scene, linking him to the crime. The cloth and hook were small, but small things led to big truths. She decided to visit Lila's shop tomorrow, to look for silver, for a case like Tom described, for anything out of place. She'd also keep an eye on Billy. His nervous grin was a crack in the mystery, and Miss Marple was good at prying cracks open. The village clock chimed 6, its sound soft against the evening hush. Miss Marple's cottage glowed with lamplight, a beacon in the quiet. She thought of the chalice, its silver gleaming in her mind. It wasn't just a cup. It was a secret, a key to something hidden in St. Mary Mead's sleepy lanes. Lila's scarf, Finch's book, Billy's stumble, they were threads in a web, and she was closing in on the spider. Chapter 5. The Hidden Clue. The morning light crept over St. Mary Mead, painting the village in soft pinks and golds. Miss Jane Marple stood at her cottage window, her sharp eyes tracing the vicarage's ivy-clad walls across the lane. Her roses nodded in the breeze, but her mind was on the stolen silver chalice, a puzzle that grew knottier with each passing day. The eerie bell at 3 a.m., the smashed study window, Griselda's shadowy figure, Dr. Finch's twitchy lies, Tom's red scarf woman, and Lila Hawthorne's guarded smile were all threads in a tapestry she was slowly weaving. Today, she'd tug, assure a new thread. Lila's antiques shop, where secrets might hide among the polished trinkets. Miss Marple pulled on her shawl and set out, her steps slow but sure, like a cat stalking a shadow. The village hummed with its usual rhythm. Children scampered to school, the milk cart rattled by, and Mrs. Price's curtains twitched at the post office. Gossip about the chalice swirled like leaves in the wind. Some said it was sold in London. By now, others whispered of a jilted lover's revenge. Miss Marple ignored the chatter. She trusted facts, not fancies, and facts were pointing her to Lila's shop. Hawthorne's Antiques sat on a quiet corner of the village square, its window gleaming with old clocks, porcelain dolls, and silver spoons. A bell jingled as Miss Marple stepped inside, the air heavy with the scent of polish and dust. Lila stood behind the counter, arranging a tray of brooches, her red scarf draped over a chair. Her dark hair was pinned neatly, but her eyes flicked to Miss Marple with a hint of unease. "Good morning, Mrs. Hawthorne," Miss Marple said, her voice warm as fresh bread. What a charming shop! So many treasures. Lila's smile was tight, like a lid on a boiling pot. Thank you, Miss Marple. Just bits and bobs, but they keep me busy. Looking for something special. Oh, I'm just browsing, Miss Marple said, her eyes roaming the shelves. Glass vases sparkled, brass candlesticks glowed, and a locked cabinet in the corner caught her attention. Its glass door was frosted, hiding what lay inside. That cabinet must hold your finest pieces, she said, nodding toward it. Lila's hand paused on a brooch. Private stock, not for sale yet. Rare things, you know, need special buyers. Her voice was smooth, but her fingers twitched, like a mouse sensing a trap. Miss Marple nodded, her smile gentle, but her mind sharp. A locked cabinet was a perfect place to hide a stolen chalice. She wandered closer, pretending to admire a silver teapot. Its surface was polished to a mirror shine, but she noticed a faint smudge. Turpentine, like the scent on Dr. Finch's coat. Her heart ticked faster. Was Lila cleaning silver, or something more? She thought of a case years ago, where a thief hid stolen jewels in a locked drawer, passing them off as new stock. Was Lila doing the same? As she browsed, Miss Marple spotted a scrap of paper under the teapot's base, half hidden by a lace doily. She bent down, her knees creaking, and slipped it into her hand. It was a sketch, rough but precise, showing the chalice's curves and carvings, with measurements scrawled in ink. The handwriting was sharp, angular, like the notes she'd seen in Finch's room at the vicarage. Her breath caught. Finch and Lila, were they linked, or was someone planting clues to mislead? Such lovely work, Miss Marple said, holding up the teapot. Do you clean all your silver yourself? It shines so brightly. Lila's eyes narrowed just for a moment. Billy helps, but I'm particular. Silver needs care, you know. She moved to the counter, blocking Miss Marple's view of the cabinet. Miss Marple smiled, tucking the sketch into her pocket. She thanked Lila and left, her mind buzzing like a beehive. The sketch was a clue, tying Finch to the shop, but why? Was it here? Was Lila his partner, or had someone left it to point suspicion her way? She thought of the red scarf, the heavy case Tom saw, Billy's nervous stumble at the fate. The pieces were piling up, but the picture was still blurry. Decided to visit Griselda to learn more about Finch's time at the vicarage. The young woman's chatter often held gems, like pebbles in a stream. Miss Marple walked to the vicarage, where Griselda was in the parlour, sorting hymnals, her curls bouncing as she hummed a tune. "Miss Marple, come in, have some tea," Griselda said, waving her inside. "Len's out visiting old Mr. Gibbs. He's got a cough again. This chalice business has us all jumpy." Miss Marple settled into a chair, her eyes scanning the room. The parlour was cosy, with faded cushions and a crackling fire, but the study door was still locked, a reminder of the theft. "Griselda, dear, tell me about Dr. Finch. You said he asked odd questions about the chalice. What did he want to know?" Griselda plopped onto a sofa, her eyes wide. "Oh, he was nosy. Kept asking where it came from, if it had any special marks. Said it might be part of some old story, like a treasure map or something. I thought he was just being bookish, but it felt sneaky." Miss Marple's heart skipped. A treasure map. Reverend Clement had mentioned a legend. and Finch's book at the fete hinted at hidden engravings. Was the chalice more than silver? A key to something buried? She recalled a case in her youth, where a stolen relic led to a cache of coins hidden under a church. Did he ever go into the study alone? She asked. Griselda nodded. All the time. Said he needed quiet to sketch. Len didn't mind. He's too trusting. But once I saw Finch measuring the chalice with a tiny ruler, like he was checking something. Miss Marple's fingers tightened on her teacup. Measuring. The sketch in Lila's shop had measurements too. Finch wasn't just studying, he was hunting. But for what? She thanked Griselda and stepped outside, her eyes drawn to the vicarage garden. The rose bed near the study window still held clues. The trampled grass, the scuff mark, the grey cloth, the metal hook. She knelt, her shawl brushing the dirt, and noticed something new. A faint smear of polish on a leaf, silvery and slick. Someone had cleaned the chalice here, maybe to hide its shine. She thought of the turpentine on Finch's coat, the smudge on Lila's teapot. Turpentine wasn't just for paint. It cleaned silver, erased traces. Was Finch cleaning the chalice? Or was Lila? Or were they working together? She stood, her mind spinning like a wheel. The sketch tied them, but the polish and hook suggested another player. Someone careless, or someone clever enough to look careless. Miss Marple decided to walk the village, lanes to clear her head and watch for signs. St. Mary Mead was quiet, its cottages snug behind hedges, but secrets rustled like leaves. She passed the church, where the chalice once stood during services, its silver gleaming under candlelight. She thought of Finch's questions about marks, Griselda's talk of a treasure. The chalice wasn't just stolen for money. It held a story, and someone wanted it badly. Near the churchyard, she spotted Billy Trent, Lila's assistant, carrying a sack of flour from the grocer's. His blonde hair flopped over his eyes, and he looked jumpy, like a rabbit hearing a fox. "Billy," Miss Marple called, her voice soft. "You're a busy lad helping Mrs. Hawthorne. Ever see anything special in her shop? A cup, maybe, like the vicarage's?" Billy's cheeks flushed. "No, Miss Marple. Just old stuff. Plates, spoons. I don't touch the locked cabinet. That's her private stuff." He shifted the sack, his eyes on the ground. Miss Marple smiled, noting his nerves. "You must work late sometimes, sorting all that stock. Were you at the shop the night the chalice was stolen?" Billy's mouth opened, then closed. I was home, I think. Yeah, home." He shuffled off, nearly dropping the flour. Miss Marple watched him go, her mind ticking. Billy's lie was as clear as glass. He'd hesitated at the fete too, saying he was at the shop when Lila claimed to be home. Someone was covering for someone, or someone was scared. She thought of the metal hook, the grey cloth. Billy didn't wear coarse jackets, but maybe someone he knew did. A delivery man, a friend, a partner in the theft. Back at her cottage, Miss Marple sat by her fire, her knitting needles clicking like a metronome. She laid out her clues. Pshiev, sketch from Lila's shop. The grey cloth, the metal hook, the polish smear, the scuff mark. Each was a thread, but the pattern was still hidden. She thought of Finch's book, its page on chalices with hidden marks. She recalled the legend Clement mentioned, tied to the chalice's past. Was it a map to treasure, or a story to lure fools. She needed to know more about the chalice's history, but first she'd watch Lila and Finch closer. The village clock chimed 7, its sound soft against the evening hush. Miss Marple's cottage glowed with lamplight, a haven in the quiet. She thought of the chalice, its silver a beacon in her mind. It wasn't just a cup, it was a secret, pointing to something buried in St. Mary Mead's sleepy lanes. The locked cabinet, Finch's measurements, Billy's lies, they were pieces of a puzzle, and Miss Marple was closing in on the truth, one careful stitch at a time. Chapter 6. The Midnight Meeting. The stars glittered over St. Mary Mead, casting a silver glow on the village's quiet lanes. Miss Jane Marple sat by her cottage window, her knitting needles still, her eyes fixed on the vicarage across the way. Sleep eluded her tonight, chased away by the puzzle of the stolen silver chalice. The eerie bell at 3 a.m., the smashed study window, Griselda's shadowy figure, Dr. Finch's twitchy lies, Tom's red scarf woman, Lila Hawthorne's guarded smile and the sketch in her shop were all threads in a knot she was determined to untie. Each clue pointed to a careful plan, not a hasty theft, and Miss Marple was no stranger to plans. She knew they unravelled with patience, like pulling a loose stitch. Her cottage, with its rose trellises and tidy hearth, was a perfect perch for watching the world. The vicarage loomed dark, its ivy black against the brick, but a faint light flickered in Dr. Finch's window, like a candle refusing to die. Miss Marple's mind turned over her clues. The grey cloth, the metal hook, the polish smear, the narrow boot mark, and the sketch with Finch's handwriting. Lila's locked cabinet and Billy's nervous stumbles added weight to the mystery. Was Finch the thief, or was he a pawn? Was Lila pulling strings, or was someone else weaving the web? She leaned closer to the window, her shawl slipping slightly. The village was still, but her instincts hummed like a plucked string. She recalled a case from years ago, where a thief met an accomplice at midnight to pass stolen goods. The night was when secrets moved, and Miss Marple decided to watch. She wrapped her shawl tighter, her eyes sharp as a cat's. At midnight, a shadow stirred in the vicarage garden. Miss Marple's heart ticked faster. A figure slipped from the house, tall, wiry, moving with a nervous jerk. Dr. Finch. He carried a small bundle wrapped in cloth and glanced over his shoulder as he crept toward the rosebeds. Miss Marple held her breath, her fingers gripping the window-sill. Another figure emerged from the lane, hooded and quick, limping slightly on one leg. They met near the hedge, their voices low, too soft for her to hear. Finch handed the bundle to the hooded figure, who tucked it under their coat. The exchange was swift, practiced, like dancers who knew the steps. The hooded figure turned, their limp more pronounced as they hurried into the darkness. Finch lingered, his eye twitching even in the dim light, then slipped back inside. Miss Marple's mind raced. A midnight meeting, a secret package, a limp. This was no random theft. It was a scheme, layered like an onion. She didn't rush out or call Constable Hurst. Shouting scared clues away, like birds from a tree. Instead she sat back, her knitting needles clicking softly as her thoughts spun. The limp was a new clue, sharp and clear. She thought of the village, its people like pieces on a board. Who limped? Old Mr. Gibbs, the farmer, had a bad leg from a fall years ago. Could he be the hooded figure, or was someone mimicking his walk to throw her off? She recalled the grey cloth, coarse like a farmer's jacket, and the polished smear near the roses. Was Gibbs tied to the chalice, or was he a scapegoat? Miss Marple brewed a pot of tea, the steam curling like her thoughts. The bundle Finch passed was small, maybe the chalice, maybe something else, a map, a note, a key. The sketch in Lila's shop showed measurements, and Griselda mentioned Finch's talk of a legend. Was the chalice a clue to something bigger, like buried treasure? She thought of a case in a coastal town, where thieves stole a relic to find a hidden cache. The chalice's carvings might hold a mark, a sign, something Finch was chasing. She decided to talk to Constable Hurst in the morning, not to accuse but to learn. Hurst was gruff, quick to jump at answers, but he heard things she didn't. She also wanted to see Mr. Gibbs, to watch his walk, his eyes. Farmers knew the land, knew hiding places. If Gibbs was involved, he might have stashed the chalice in a barn or ditch. But first she'd check the garden again at dawn for traces of the midnight meeting. The sun rose slowly, painting the village in soft light. Miss Marple stepped into the vicarage garden, her shawl catching the dew. The rose beds were quiet, but she spotted fresh marks. 2 sets of footprints, one narrow, one heavier, near the hedge where Finch met the hooded figure. The heavier prints showed a drag, like a limp. She knelt, her fingers brushing the dirt, and found a tiny shred of brown paper, like the wrapping on Billy's parcel at the fete. Her heart skipped. Was Billy involved, or was the paper a plant meant to mislead? She walked to the church where the chalice once stood, hoping its history might spark a clue. Reverend Clement was there, dusting the altar, his glasses fogged with worry. "Miss Marple," he said, "I can't shake this guilt. The chalice was my responsibility." "Nonsense, Leonard," she said, patting his arm. "Thieves don't ask permission." Did Dr. Finch ever mention a specific legend about the chalice? Something about a treasure? Clement frowned, pushing up his glasses. "He did, actually," said. "It might be linked to Sir Edmund Vale, who gave it to the church in 1650. Something about a hidden mark, a clue to his fortune. I thought it was just a story, but Finch was obsessed." Miss Marple's mind buzzed. Sir Edmund Vale. A name, a lead. She thanked Clement and headed to the village library, a small room tucked behind the post office. The librarian, Miss Hart, was a fussy woman with a love for old records. "Miss Marple, looking for something?" she asked, peering over her. "Spectacles. Just a bit of history," Miss Marple said, her smile gentle. "Anything on Sir Edmund Vale from the 1600s? Miss Hart dug through dusty ledgers, pulling out a thin book on local families. It mentioned Sir Edmund, a wealthy man who hid his gold during the Civil War, fearing rebels. A note said his chalice, given to the church, bore a secret mark pointing to his treasure. Miss Marple's heart ticked faster. Finch's sketches, his measurements, his midnight meeting. They weren't about the chalice's silver, but its secret. She left the library, her thoughts spinning. The chalice was a map, and Finch was chasing it. But who was the hooded figure? Gibbs, with his limp? Leela, hiding her walk? Or someone new? She recalled the polished smear, the turpentine on Finch's coat. Someone had cleaned the chalice, maybe to check its carvings. The brown paper shred linked to Billy. But his nervous lies didn't fit a mastermind. Was he a messenger or a dupe? Miss Marple stopped by Constable Hurst's office, a cramped room smelling of ink and tobacco. Hurst was scribbling notes, his face red. "Miss Marple, come to solve my case," he teased, but his eyes were tired. "Just curious," she said, her voice soft. "Any news on the chalice? Anything from Mr. Gibbs, perhaps?" Hurst leaned back. "Funny you mention Gibbs. He reported a stolen shovel from his shed, found near the vicarage yesterday. Had some silver polish on the handle. Odd thing for so big shovel." Miss Marple's breath caught. "A shovel, polish, the garden. Someone used it to clean or hide the chalice, maybe to dig for treasure." Gibbs's limp matched the hooded figure, but his stolen shovel suggested a frame. "Did Gibbs say anything else?" she asked. "Said he saw a stranger near his farm 2 nights ago," Hurst said. "Didn't get a good look, but they had a limp, like his. Thought it was a tramp." Miss Marple nodded, her mind racing. A limp, a shovel, a stranger. The clues were piling up, but they pointed in circles. She thanked Hurst and left, her steps slow, but her thoughts quick. Gibbs was a piece of the puzzle, but was he thief or victim? She decided to visit his farm later, to see his shed, his walk, his story. Back at her cottage, Miss Marple sat by her fire, her knitting needles clicking like a clock. She laid out her clues: the grey cloth, the metal hook, the polished smear, the boot mark, the sketch, the brown paper shred. The midnight meeting was the key, tying Finch to the hooded figure. The limp pointed to Gibbs, but the shovel suggested someone else. Lila's shop, Billy's parcel, the legend of Sir Edmund. They were all threads, and she was close to the pattern. The village clock chimed 9, its sound soft against the night. Miss Marple's cottage glowed with warmth, a beacon in the quiet. The chalice was more than silver. It was a secret, a map to something hidden in St. Mary Mead's fields. Finch's bundle, the hooded figure's limp, Gibbs's shovel, they were clues to a bigger game, and Miss Marple was ready to play her hand. Chapter 7. The Vicar's Secret. The dawn crept over St. Mary Mead, brushing the village with a soft glow that turned the dew on Miss Jane Marple's roses to tiny diamonds. She stood at her cottage window, her sharp eyes fixed on the vicarage, its red brick walls half hidden by ivy. The mystery of the stolen silver chalice was a knot in her mind, growing tighter with each clue. The eerie bell at 3 a.m., the smashed study window, Griselda's shadowy figure, Dr. Finch's twitchy lies, Tom's red-scarf woman, Lila Hawthorne's locked cabinet, the midnight meeting, and the limping figure with Gibbs's stolen shovel. Each was a thread, and Miss Marple was weaving them slowly, her patience as steady as her knitting needles. Today she'd tug a new thread. Reverend Clement, the earnest vicar, whose worry seemed heavier than guilt over a stolen cup. Miss Marple pulled her shawl tight and stepped into the morning chill, her steps slow but sure. The village was waking. Smoke curled from chimneys, the baker's boy whistled down the lane, and a dog barked near the church. Gossip about the chalice swirled like mist. Some blamed a travelling peddler. Others whispered of a family feud. Miss Marple ignored the noise. She trusted what she saw, what she heard, and the vicar's pale face yesterday had told a story. He wasn't just upset. He was hiding something, like a child clutching a secret too big to keep. The vicarage stood, quiet, its garden a patchwork of roses and weeds. Miss Marple knocked and Griselda opened the door, her curls wild and her smile bright. "Miss Marple, come in," Len's in the parlour, fussing over his sermons. "Tea?" "Thank you, dear," Miss Marple said, settling into a chair. The parlour was warm, cluttered with books and cushions, but the locked study door loomed like a shadow. Reverend Clement sat at a table, papers scattered, his glasses slipping down his nose. He looked up, his eyes tired, like a man carrying a load too heavy. "Miss Marple," he said, managing a weak smile, "you're a comfort in all this mess. I can't stop thinking I failed the parish, letting that chalice go." Miss Marple tilted her head, her voice soft as a breeze. "Nonsense, Leonard. Thieves don't wait for your permission. But you seem troubled, more than just the chalice. Is there something you haven't told?" Clement's hand froze on a paper, his fingers trembling. Griselda glanced at him, her smile fading. Miss Marple waited, letting the silence press like a gentle hand. Silence made people talk, and Clement was no exception. He sighed, pushing his glasses up. "You're too sharp, Miss Marple. There's something, yes. A letter came a few days before the theft. Anonymous, no name. It said, 'Guard the chalice, or you'll lose it.' I thought it was a prank, village nonsense. But now—" Miss Marple's heart ticked faster, but her face stayed calm, like a pond hiding a current. "A letter," she said. "May I see it, Leonard?" He hesitated, then rose and fetched a folded paper from a drawer. It was plain, the ink black and precise, the words sharp. "Guard the chalice, or you'll lose it." Miss Marple studied it, her eyes tracing the handwriting. It was neat, almost too neat, like the sketch she'd found in Lila's shop. The same angular strokes, the same careful loops. Finch's handwriting, or someone copying it? She recalled a case years ago where a warning note was a thief's trick to distract the victim. Was this letter a decoy, or a real threat? "Did you show anyone?" she asked, folding the paper carefully. Clement shook his head. "Just Griselda. I didn't want to worry the parish. I thought it was nothing, but now I feel I should have acted." Griselda leaned forward, her eyes wide. "It gave me the creeps, Miss Marple. Who writes a note like that? Someone who knew the chalice would be taken, right?" "Perhaps," Miss Marple said, her voice mild. She tucked the letter into her pocket with Clement's permission. "Don't blame yourself, Leonard. Thieves are clever, and you're no detective." Clement managed a small laugh, but his eyes stayed heavy. Miss Marple sipped her tea, her mind spinning. The letter was a new clue, tying the theft to a plan. Someone knew the chalice was at risk, someone who watched the vicarage. Finch, with his sketches and midnight meetings, Leela, with her locked cabinet and red scarf, or Gibbs, with his limp and stolen shovel. The handwriting nagged at her. It matched the sketch, but it felt staged, like a prop left to be found. She left the vicarage, her steps slow, her thoughts quick. The garden called her back, its rose beds hiding secrets. She knelt by the study window, where the grass was still, trampled, the narrow bootmark clear. The Polish smear and metal hook were gone, tucked safely in her cottage. But she noticed something new. A tiny chip of wood, painted green, caught in the dirt. It was small, like a flake from a tool handle. A spade, maybe, or a crowbar. She slipped it into her pocket, her heart ticking. Gibbs's shovel, found with polish, was wooden, not painted. Was this from another tool or another thief? Miss Marple walked to the village square, needing air to clear her thoughts. The fate was gone, but the square bustled with life. Shopkeepers swept doorsteps, children chased a ball, and Mrs. Price's curtains twitched. Miss Marple settled on a bench, her knitting in her lap, her eyes scanning for Lila, Finch, or Gibbs. She thought of the letter, its warning sharp as a blade. Someone wanted the chalice, but why warn Clement? To scare him, or to cover their tracks? She spotted Billy Trent, Lila's assistant, hauling a crate to the antiques shop. His blonde hair flopped over his eyes, and he moved fast, like a boy dodging trouble. Miss Marple called out, her voice warm. "Billy, you're working hard. Ever see any letters at the shop? Notes about silver, maybe?" Billy froze, his crate wobbling. "Letters? No, Miss Marple, just bills and stuff. Mrs. Hawthorne handles all that." His cheeks reddened, and he hurried off. Miss Marple's needles clicked, her mind sharp. Billy's nerves were a flag, waving high. He knew something, but fear kept him quiet. She thought of his parcel at the fete, the brown paper shred in the garden. Was he carrying messages or stolen goods? She decided to visit Gibbs's farm next, to check his shed, his limp, his story. The farm lay at the village edge, its fields golden with wheat. Gibbs was in his yard, feeding chickens, his bad leg dragging slightly. He was a stout man, his face weathered like old wood, his eyes narrow with suspicion. "Miss Marple," he grunted, "heard you're poking into the chalice business." "Just curious," she said, her smile gentle. "Constable Hurst mentioned your stolen shovel. Found near the vicarage, wasn't it? With polish on it." Gibbs's eyes flickered. "Aye, stolen from my shed. Don't know how it got there. I ain't been near the vicarage in weeks." His voice was gruff, but his hands shook, scattering. "Chicken feed." Miss Marple nodded, watching his limp as he moved. It matched the hooded figure's walk, but his surprise at the shovel seemed real. "Did you see anyone near your shed? A stranger, maybe, with a limp like yours?" Gibbs scratched his beard. "Told Hurst about that. Saw a fellow 2 nights back skulking by the barn. Limped a bit, but it was dark. Could have been anyone." Miss Marple's heart ticked faster. A limping stranger, a stolen shovel, a warning letter. Someone was weaving a web and Gibbs was caught in it. Thief or scapegoat, she wasn't sure. She thanked him and peered into his shed, its door ajar. Tools hung neatly, no green paint anywhere. The shovel was gone, with Hurst, but a faint smell lingered, turpentine sharp and familiar. Her breath caught. Finch's coat, Lila's teapot, now Gibbs's shed. The scent was a thread, tying them together. Back at her cottage, Miss Marple sat by her fire, her knitting a steady rhythm. She laid out her clues. The letter, the grey cloth, the metal hook, the polished smear, the boot mark, the sketch, the brown, paper, the green chip. The letter's handwriting matched Finch's, but its precision felt staged. The turpentine linked Finch, Lila, and now Gibbs. The limp pointed to Gibbs, but the shovel suggested a frame. She thought of a case in a nearby village where a thief left a tool to blame another. Was someone pointing at Gibbs, or was he deeper in the game? She decided to dig into Sir Edmund Vale's legend, the chalice's supposed secret. The library's book had mentioned a hidden mark, a clue to treasure. Finch's sketches, his measurements, his midnight bundle, they all pointed to that mark. Was he passing it to the hooded figure or searching for it? She'd visit the library again to find more on Vale, and she'd watch Billy closer. His lies were cracks, and cracks let truth slip through. The village clock chimed 8, its sound soft in the evening hush. Miss Marple's cottage glowed, with lamplight, a haven in the quiet. The chalice was a key, not just silver, and the letter was a warning, or a trick. Finch, Lila, Gibbs, Billy, they were players in a game, and Miss Marple was closing in, one careful step at a time. Chapter 8. The Chalice's Past. The morning sun draped St. Mary Mead in a golden veil, its light catching the dew on Miss Jane Marple's roses like tiny stars. She stood at her cottage gate, her sharp eyes tracing the vicarage's red brick walls across the lane. The mystery of the stolen silver chalice was a puzzle with too many pieces. The eerie bell at 3 a.m., the smashed study window, Griselda's shadowy figure, Dr. Finch's twitchy lies, Tom's red scarf woman, Lila Hawthorne's locked cabinet, the midnight meeting with a limping figure, Gibbs's stolen shovel, and the anonymous letter warning, Reverend Clement. Each clue was a thread, and Miss Marple's patient hands were weaving them into a pattern. Today, she'd chase a new lead, the chalice's history, tied to Sir Edmund Vale's legend of hidden treasure. Miss Marple smoothed her shawl and set out for the village library, her steps steady despite the ache in her knees. The village was stirring. Chimneys puffed smoke, the blacksmith's hammer clanged, and children scampered past with schoolbooks. Gossip about the chalice buzzed like bees. Some swore it was melted down by now. Others spun tales of a secret society. Miss Marple ignored the chatter, her mind on facts. The letter's precise handwriting, matching Finch's sketch, hinted at a plan. The turpentine scent linking Finch, Lila, and Gibbs's shed suggested a team, or a trick. The limping figure pointed to Gibbs, but the shovel felt like a frame. She needed to know more about the chalice itself, its supposed hidden mark. The library, a cosy room behind the post office, smelled of old paper and wax. Miss Hart, the librarian, greeted her with a nod, her spectacles glinting. Miss Marple, back so soon? More history to dig up. Just a bit, Miss Marple said, her smile warm. Anything more on Sir Edmund Vale from the 1600s? His chalice, perhaps. Miss Hart bustled to a shelf, pulling down a dusty ledger and a slim pamphlet on local relics. Vale was a tricky one, she said, flipping pages. Rich, secretive, hid his gold during the Civil War. Gave the chalice to the church in 1650, said it was for salvation, but rumours claimed it held a mark, a clue to his treasure etched in the silver. Miss Marple's heart ticked faster, but her face stayed calm, like a still pond. She leaned over the pamphlet, her eyes scanning a faded drawing of a chalice, its base carved with vines and a tiny cross. A note read, Sir Edmund's mark, hidden in the design, points to his fortune, buried where none shall find. She recalled Finch's sketches, his measurements, his talk of a legend. Was he chasing this mark, or had he already found it? She thanked Miss Hart and tucked the pamphlet's details into her mind, like a seed in rich soil. Back in the village square, Miss Marple settled on a bench, her knitting in her lap, her eyes watching the crowd. The chalice wasn't just silver, it was a map, and someone wanted it badly. Finch's midnight meeting, passing a bundle to a limping figure, suggested he'd found something. The letter to Clement, warning of the theft, felt like a decoy, meant to stir panic. She thought of a case years ago, where a thief sent a note to distract a victim while stealing a painting. Was Finch playing the same game, or was someone using his handwriting to point blame? She spotted Dr. Finch crossing the square, his tweed coat flapping, his eye twitching as he glanced around. He carried a satchel, bulging slightly, and headed toward the church. Miss Marple's needles paused. Finch in the church, where the chalice once stood. Was he looking for clues, or covering tracks? She rose, her shawl slipping, and followed. At a distance, her steps soft as a cat's. The church was cool and dim, its stained glass casting coloured patches on the stone floor. Finch knelt near the altar, his satchel open, a notebook in his hands. He was sketching, not the altar, but the floor tiles, his pencil moving fast. Miss Marple slipped into a pew, her knitting a quiet cover. She watched his fingers, stained with ink and a faint smear of turpentine. The smell was sharp, like a clue waving in her face. Was he cleaning silver, or something else? "Dr. Finch," she called, her voice gentle, studying the church's history. Such a peaceful place. Finch jumped, his notebook slipping. "Miss Marple? Yes, just tiles, old designs, fascinating, patterns." His eye twitched, and he stuffed the notebook into his satchel. Miss Marple smiled, her eyes sharp. "Patterns are telling, aren't they? Like the chalice's carvings. Did you ever find that mark you were looking for?" Finch's face paled, his fingers tightening on the satchel. "Mark? No, just silver, you know. I should go." He hurried out, leaving a pencil behind. Miss Marple picked it up, noting its chewed end like a nervous habit. The notebook page she'd glimpsed showed a tile with a cross, like the one in the pamphlet. Finch wasn't studying history. He was hunting treasure, and the church was part of it. She thought of the chalices, mark Sir Edmund's clue. Was it etched in the silver, or was the chalice itself a pointer to something here, in the church? She left the church and walked to Gibbs's farm, needing to check his shed again. The fields were golden, the air thick with the scent of hay. Gibbs was mending a fence, his limp clear as he moved. "Miss Marple?" he grunted, wiping sweat from his brow. "Still chasing that chalice?" "Just curious," she said, her smile soft. "Your shed's been busy with that stolen shovel. Mind if I take another look?" Gibbs shrugged, leading her to the shed. It was tidy, tools hung on hooks, but the turpentine smell lingered, stronger now. She noticed a new detail, a smudge of green paint on a shelf, like the chip she'd found in the garden. Her heart ticked. The shovel wasn't painted, but something here was. "Ever use green paint, Mr. Gibbs?" she asked. He frowned. "Not me. Maybe the lad who helps, Tommy Lane. He's always fixing things." Miss Marple nodded, filing the name away. Tommy Lane, a farmhand, young and wiry, no limp. Was he the limping figure, faking a walk to mimic Gibbs? She thanked him and left, her mind buzzing. The green chip, the turpentine, the limping figure. They pointed to a plan, but whose? She stopped by the antiques shop, hoping to catch Lila. The bell jingled as she entered, but Billy Trent was alone, dusting shelves. His blonde hair flopped over his eyes, and he jumped when he saw her. "Miss Marple, Mrs. Hawthorne's out, delivering a clock." "That's fine, Billy," she said, her voice warm. "You must see all sorts of treasures. Ever notice a chalice, or a tool with green paint?" Billy's hands shook, knocking a spoon off the shelf. No, just regular stuff. No paint, no chalices." His cheeks reddened, and he bent to pick up the spoon. Miss Marple smiled, noting his nerves. Billy was a weak link, too young to lie well. She glanced at the locked cabinet, still frosted, still secret. "Mrs. Hawthorne's careful with her stock, isn't she? That cabinet must hold something special." Billy nodded, his eyes on the floor. "Her private stuff. I don't touch it." He shuffled to the back, muttering about work. Miss Marple left, her mind spinning. Billy's fear, the green paint, the letters' handwriting, they were threads, but the pattern was elusive. She thought of the midnight meeting, Finch's bundle, the limping figure. Was Tommy Lane involved, or was Gibbs the key? The turpentine tied them all. Finch, Lila, Gibbs's shed. She recalled a case where a thief used a scent to mislead, planting clues to confuse. Was someone doing that here? Back at her cottage, Miss Marple sat by her fire, her knitting needles clicking like a heartbeat. She laid out her clues: the letter, the grey cloth, the metal hook, the polished smear, the boot mark, the sketch, the brown paper, the green chip. The pamphlet's note on Sir Edmund's mark was the heart of it. Finch's sketches, his church tiles, his bundle, they all pointed to treasure. The letter warned Clement, but it felt like a trick, like the limp, like the shovel. She decided to watch the church tonight, in case Finch returned. She'd also talk to Tommy Lane, to see if he limped or painted tools green. The chalice was a map, and someone was close to its secret. The village clock chimed 6, its sound soft in the evening hush. Miss Marple's cottage glowed, a beacon in the quiet. The chalice's past was calling, and she was ready to answer, one careful stitch at a time. Chapter 9. The Trap. The evening draped St. Mary Mead in a velvet hush, the village's cottages glowing like lanterns under a starry sky. Miss Jane Marple sat by her cottage window, her knitting needles still, her sharp eyes fixed on the vicarage's shadowed outline. The mystery of the stolen silver chalice was a tangled web, its threads tightening with each clue. The eerie bell at 3 a.m., the smashed study window, Griselda's shadowy figure, Dr. Finch's twitchy lies, Tom's red scarf woman, Lila Hawthorne's locked cabinet, the midnight meeting with a limping figure, Gibbs's stolen shovel, the anonymous letter, and the legend of Sir Edmund Vale's hidden mark. Each piece pointed to a careful plan, not a simple theft, and Miss Marple's patient mind was close to unravelling it. Tonight she'd set a trap to catch the thief, or thieves, red-handed. Her cottage, with its rose trellises and warm hearth, was a quiet perch for plotting. The chalice wasn't just silver. It was a key to a treasure, etched with a mark from Sir Edmund's time. Finch's sketches, his church tiles, his midnight bundle, they all chased that mark. The letter to Reverend Clement, with its precise handwriting, felt like a decoy, meant to stir fear. The turpentine scent tied Finch, Lila, and Gibbs's shed. But the green paint chip and Tommy Lane's name hinted at another player. The limping figure could be Gibbs, or someone mimicking him. Miss Marple needed to flush them out, like a gardener shaking pests from a bush. She devised a plan, a rumour, spread carefully to lure the thief. She'd tell Griselda the chalice had been found in the vicarage attic, a lie to spark action. Thieves hated loose ends, and this one would move fast to check or steal it again. Miss Marple sipped her tea, her mind sharp as a needle. She recalled a case in a nearby village where a rumour about a recovered jewel brought the thief running. The trap was simple but clever, and she'd need Constable Hurst's help to spring it. She visited the vicarage at noon, the sun high and the village buzzing. Griselda was in the garden, pruning roses, her curls bouncing. "Miss Marple, you're out early, still chasing that chalice?" Miss Marple smiled, her voice low. "Griselda, dear, keep this quiet, but they found the chalice in the attic, tucked in an old trunk. Constable Hurst is checking it now. Don't tell a soul, not even Leonard." Griselda's eyes widened, her shears pausing. "Really? That's wonderful. I won't say a word, promise." Her voice was eager, too loud, perfect for spreading the news. Miss Marple nodded, knowing Griselda's promise would break by supper. Gossip was a river in St. Mary Mead, and Griselda was a leaky dam. She left, her shawl catching the breeze, and stopped by Constable Hurst's office. Hurst was polishing his boots, his face red from the heat. "Miss Marple, come to solve my case again," he teased. "Not quite," she said, her smile gentle. "But I've spread a rumour. The chalice is found in the vicarage attic. I need you to watch the vicarage tonight near the garden. Someone may come looking." Hurst's eyebrows rose. "A trap, eh? Clever. I'll be there, with young Constable Reed. Anyone sneaks in, we'll nab 'em." Miss Marple thanked him and returned home, her heart ticking like a clock. The rumour would spread, Griselda to the baker to the post office, and soon the whole village would hum. She spent the afternoon knitting, her eyes on the vicarage, watching for signs. By dusk, the news had taken root. She overheard Mrs. Price at the grocer's, whispering about the found chalice. The trap was set, and Miss Marple was ready to watch it spring. Night fell, dark and heavy, the village quiet except for a distant owl. Miss Marple sat by her window, her shawl wrapped tight, her eyes sharp. Hurst and Reed hid near the vicarage hedge, their shapes barely visible. At 2 a.m., a figure crept into the garden, slim, quick, with a red scarf fluttering. Lila Hawthorne, Miss Marple's breath caught. Lila moved to the study window, her hands gloved, a small tool glinting in the moonlight. She was picking the lock, her movements practiced, like a thief who'd done this before. Before Hurst could move, another figure appeared. Dr. Finch, his wiry frame tense, his satchel clutched tight. He hissed at Lila, his voice low but sharp. "What are you doing? It's not here!" Lila spun, her scarf slipping. You said it was found. I'm not letting it slip away, Elias. Miss Marple's heart raced. Elias, Finch's first name. They were partners, not rivals. But their argument was cut short by a third figure, lumbering from the shadows. Mr. Gibbs, his limp clear, holding the chalice, its silver gleaming. "But you two thought you'd cut me out," he growled. "I've got it, and it's mine." Hurst and Reed sprang forward, lanterns blazing. "Stop right there!" Hurst shouted, his voice booming. Lila dropped her tool. Finch froze, and Gibbs clutched the chalice, his eyes wild. The garden erupted in chaos. Shouts, scuffles, the clatter of the chalice hitting the ground. Miss Marple watched, her knitting still, her mind piecing it together. Hurst cuffed Gibbs, who was shouting, "I didn't steal it. I found it in my barn." Lila tried to run, but Reed caught her arm. Finch stood silent, his eye twitching, his satchel spilling papers, sketches, maps, notes on Sir Edmund's mark. Miss Marple slipped out, joining the scene, her shawl catching. "The night air. Constable," she said, her voice calm. "Let's hear them out. The truth's tangled, but it's here." Gibbs, red-faced, spilled his story. "I found the chalice in my barn, hidden in a sack. Thought it was the treasure, like the legend said. I was going to give it back, I swear." Lila glared at him. "You double-crossed us, Gibbs. We had a deal. Find the mark, split the treasure." Finch's voice was low, defeated. "It was a plan. Leela and I, we knew about Sir Edmund's mark. Gibbs was our muscle, but he got greedy, hid the chalice." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes sharp. "The letter, the limp, the shovel, it was a set-up. Lila and Finch staged the theft, using Gibbs's barn to hide the chalice, planning to find the mark later. Gibbs, hearing the rumour, thought he'd been betrayed and brought the chalice to confront them. The green paint, the brown paper, Billy's nerves, they were loose ends in their scheme. "Constable," Miss Marple said, "search Gibbs's barn. You'll find more. Maybe tools, maybe maps." Hurst nodded, dragging the trio to his office. Miss Marple picked up the chalice, its silver cool in her hands. No mark was visible, but the legend had driven them all. Greed, not truth, she thought, of a case where a thief chased a myth, only to find an empty box. The chalice was a key, but its treasure was a lie. Back at her cottage, Miss Marple sat by her fire, her knitting needles clicking. Her clues, the letter, the cloth, the hook, the polish, the bootmark, the sketch, the paper, the paint, had led her here. The trap had worked, catching 3 thieves in one net. The village clock chimed 3, its sound soft, not eerie. Saint, Mary Mead would sleep tonight, its chalice safe, its secrets cracked open by a quiet spinster with a sharp mind. Chapter 10. The Satisfying End. The morning sun bathed St. Mary Mead in a gentle glow, its golden light spilling over the village's cottages and lanes, softening the edges of a mystery now solved. Miss Jane Marple sat by her cottage fire, her knitting needles clicking like a soft heartbeat, her sharp eyes resting on the roses outside her window. The silver chalice, stolen from the vicarage, was back where it belonged, its gleam restored to the church altar. The web of clues, the eerie bell at 3 a.m., the smashed study window, Griselda's shadowy figure, Dr. Finch's twitchy lies, Tom's red scarf woman, Lila Hawthorne's locked cabinet, the midnight meeting, Gibbs's stolen shovel, the anonymous letter, and Sir Edmund Vale's legend had unravelled in last night's trap. Lila, Finch, and Gibbs were in Constable Hurst's custody, their scheme exposed, but Miss Marple's mind still turned, tying the final threads of the tale. The village was quiet again, its rhythm steady as the ticking of its clock. Children played in the square, the baker's cart rattled by, and Mrs. Price's curtains no longer twitched with suspicion. Yet Miss Marple knew peace was fragile, like a rose petal caught in the wind. She sipped her tea, her thoughts drifting to the trap that had caught the thieves. Spreading the rumour of the chalice's discovery in the vicarage attic had worked like a charm, luring Lila, Finch, and Gibbs to the garden, where Hurst pounced. Their confessions, spilled in the lantern-lit chaos, had laid bare a plot, driven by greed and myth. Miss Marple rose, her shawl slipping slightly, and walked to the vicarage to see Griselda. The young woman was in the parlour, arranging flowers, her curls bouncing as she hummed. "Miss Marple!" she cried, dropping. "A daisy! You're a marvel! Len's over the moon! The chalice is back, and the village can't stop talking about your trap." Miss Marple smiled, settling into a chair. "It was a group effort, dear. Constable Hurst did the heavy lifting. Tell me, how's Leonard feeling?" Griselda plopped onto a sofa, her eyes bright. Relieved, but still guilty. "He thinks he should have seen through Finch. I told him nobody could. Except you, of course." Miss Marple's needles clicked, her mind replaying the case. Finch, the wiry historian, had been the brains, chasing Sir Edmund's legend of a hidden mark. Lila, the sharp-eyed antiques dealer, was his partner, using her shop to fence treasures. Gibbs, the gruff farmer, was their muscle, hiding the chalice in his barn. But greed made him betray them. The trap had caught them all. But Miss Marple wanted to explain the clues, to ease Griselda's curiosity and her own need to see the puzzle whole. "Let me tell you how it came together," she said, her voice soft as a breeze. "It started with the bell ringing at 3 a.m. That wasn't an accident. It was Finch, testing the vicarage's quiet, making sure no one stirred. The smashed window was deliberate too, broken from inside to look like an outsider's work. Griselda, your shadow in the garden was Lila, scouting the night before." Griselda gasped, her hand on her heart. "Lila? With that red scarf? I thought she was just a fancy shopkeeper." Miss Marple nodded. Her scarf was bold, meant to be seen, to throw us off. Tom saw her by the hedge, carrying a case, likely tools to break the window later. The footprints in the garden, so careful, showed their plan. Finch's turpentine scent, on his coat and in Lila's shop, came from cleaning the chalice, checking for Sir Edmund's mark. They thought it led to treasure. Griselda leaned forward, her eyes wide. That legend! Len said Finch was obsessed. With it, was there really a mark? Miss Marple's smile was faint. "I looked at the chalice this morning, with Reverend Clement's permission. Its carvings are lovely. Vines, crosses, but no hidden mark. The legend was a story, nothing more. Finch read it in old books, and it drove him. Leila saw profit. Gibbs saw gold. They staged the theft, hid the chalice in Gibbs's barn, and planned to sell it once they found the mark." Griselda frowned. "But Gibbs had it last night. Why?" "Greed," Miss Marple said, her needles pausing. Gibbs thought Finch and Lila were cutting him out. He found the chalice in his barn and kept it, hoping to find the treasure alone. My rumour about the attic flushed him out. He couldn't resist checking. Griselda clapped her hands. You're brilliant! But what about the letter to Len? That warning? A trick, Miss Marple said. Finch wrote it, using his neat handwriting, to scare Leonard into locking the chalice away, making it easier to steal later. But it matched the sketch in Lila's shop, tying them together. The green paint chip from a tool in Gibbs's shed was their mistake. Tommy Lane, Gibbs's helper, painted it, not knowing it would leave a trace. Griselda shook her head, amazed. And Billy, Leela's boy, he was so jumpy. Billy was their messenger, Miss Marple said. He carried notes, parcels, maybe even the chalice to the barn. His lies at the fete, his nerves, they showed. He was in over his head, too young to keep secrets well. Griselda sighed, her curls bouncing. You saw it all, Miss Marple. The cloth, the hook, the polish. How did you know? Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. People are like gardens, dear. You watch, you wait, you see what grows. The grey cloth was from Gibbs's jacket, torn when he hid the chalice. The metal hook was from Lila's case, dropped in the rush. The polish smear was their attempt to clean the silver, to check for the mark. Each clue was a petal, showing the flower. Griselda laughed, her voice bright. You make it sound so simple. Len's polishing the chalice now, for Sunday service. The village feels right again. Miss Marple nodded, her heart light. She left the vicarage, her shawl catching the breeze, and walked to the church. Reverend Clement was there, the chalice gleaming on the altar, its silver catching the light through stained glass. He looked up, his glasses shining. Miss Marple, you've saved us. I can't thank you enough. No need, Leonard, she said, her voice soft. The chalice belongs here with St. Mary Mead. Keep it safe. Clement smiled, his worry gone. I will. No more legends or thieves, I hope. Miss Marple left the church, her steps slow, but her mind clear. The village was peaceful, its lanes quiet, its secrets laid bare. She thought of her clues, the letter, the cloth, the hook, the polish, the boot mark, the sketch, the brown paper, the green chip. Each had pointed to the truth, like stars guiding a traveller. Finch, Lila, and Gibbs were in Hurst's cells, their scheme undone by greed and a spinster's sharp eyes. Back at her cottage, Miss Marple sat by her fire, her knitting, a steady rhythm. She thought of a case years ago, where a thief chased a myth, only to find an empty dream. The chalice's legend was just that, a story luring fools. Human nature, she mused, was as predictable as her roses, blooming with hope and wilting with greed. She recalled her nephew Raymond calling her a nosy old bat with a grin. He wasn't wrong, but nosiness had saved the chalice. The village clock chimed noon, its sound warm and steady, not eerie like the vicarage bell. St. Mary Mead was safe, its heart restored. Miss Marple's needles clicked, her eyes on her garden. The roses were blooming, their petals bright against the green. Another mystery might come, as sure as weeds in spring. But for now she was content. Truth had blossomed, and the village was whole again.